Dun, 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 dun. Yo, what is up, everybody out there? How's it going? Winding down. I can't believe winding down February. What the February is going on here? Spike T. Smith, first-time offender on the show. Excited to have Spike. Spike was kind enough to also be a guest answer reader as a surprise to the people that joined our most recent music trivia game called Come Get Punked, because it was all punk music history, albums, artists, lyrics, things like that. Welcome, Spike. So excited to have you, man.
Hey, Dan, great to be here. And thank you very much for the invite. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So much to talk about. You've played with so many great bands and a couple of crappy ones. No, I'm kidding. You've played with so many great, and not all the same either. We'll talk about that. I mean, from Sham 69, Morrissey, you got Killing Joke, New York Dolls, Memoriam. We got clips to show too, people. So hold on. Even one with Spike playing with HR, A Bad Brains, who Spike turned my wife and I onto punk reggae. What kind of soup is that? I don't know, but it tastes great. Really good stuff. But let's start with this. Why the drums? How did this happen? How did it come up?
Okay, well, I mean, I've been into music since I can remember, since I was a little boy. My dad was a musician, Dan. He was a guitarist. So from a very early age, music was around the house, equipment was around the house. And I used to go with him to set up his equipment, because I come from a small town in North Wales called Holyhead. It's a port, actually. It's anybody that's catching a boat from the mainland in the UK to Ireland will highly likely go through Holyhead because it's the closest point to Dublin. Anyway, so we lived in a small port town. This is, the sort of like early mid-70s for me. And I used to go with my dad, help him set up his equipment, go and break down the equipment the next day.
The fun part.
From the pubs and clubs. I've been in every pub and club in Holyhead, way before I was 10. and this was before, like children were allowed in bars and pubs.
Right.
A bit different to how they are now. They're more of a family setup.
Yeah.
But then it was strictly over 18s, unless you were going with your dad to help.
But you were with the band.
Yeah.
Now you are the band.
Yeah. I always thought that, I felt as if I wanted to be a guitarist. He was a guitarist, and I did love the guitar. I still do, actually. But I never took to it. He did get me a guitar. He tried to help me, tried to teach for whatever reason. I just, I couldn't get on with it, but I was still, very seriously into music. And then when I went to secondary school, that was all when I was younger. That was in what we call over here primary school. So, you're very early schooling. And then secondary school, when I was about 12, when I was 12, I started going to what we call over here youth club discos. And I was exposed to punk, to cut a long story short. There was a lot of different styles of music going on in the disco. It's very segmented. It would be like, there'd be a section that, of course, there'd be the mainstream music, disco music of the day, say. And then, there'd be a rock section, what we'd call then heavy rock. Maybe a Motown section or Northern Soul, and a punk section. And, the various little local, youth tribes would get up and dance in their appropriate fashion to whatever music that they were following, or had even brought, people brought their records to get them played in the disco.
Oh, neat.
And so when I first went to this, and to this, what felt like slightly older, because it was teenagers, so I was still 12, and there was anything from sort of, 12 to 18-year-olds. It was slightly older kids. And I just heard all these different forms of music or kinds of music that were being played to me in one night. And it was a revelation. But the punk one really, grabbed me. And so, within a very short time, I've saw, my allegiance is to punk rock.
That's
And
cool.
I'm buying the records and, trying to follow the bands. And then a strange little thing happened. My dad was watching a program that was broadcast in the UK at the time called The Old Grey Whistle Test. I don't know if you ever
Right.
heard of that.
Yeah, very familiar. Yeah.
It captures some classic footage of bands. Bands would go in, for those who don't know, who might be watching or listening, and bands would go in and would play, say, 2 songs live in the studio, and they'd have a number of bands on through, each series or each episode, or each program even. And one night there was a band called The Damned on, and I just come in. I'd been probably out with my friends, and my dad was watching this program. I hadn't even heard of it. But, I literally just came on and the presenter was, and now blah, 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 promoting a new album, The Damned. I was like, wow, because you just couldn't get to see music like that on any TV over here. And, of course, this is 1979, so it was really still 3 channels,
Wow.
Yeah.
Prehistoric.
Yeah, and this program was on BBC Two, like the oddest channel,
Yeah.
the one that you didn't really look at unless you were. I don't know. I suppose it was a little bit more highbrow in some ways, but anyway. So yeah, I couldn't believe it. So of course I'm like, wow, The Damned! I've just been getting their record. I love this band, and I didn't know who played what from the pictures on the sleeves because they didn't say anything. So I was even more intrigued. And I was just drawn to the drummer, Rat Scabies. And, it was just like, wow, God, this is brilliant. I mean, I was looking at all of them, but, the drums and Rat Scabies was the one that was really grabbing me. And what was the great thing with it was, Dan, was they were playing 2 songs on this program. They didn't even get to the end of the second song before Rat Scabies is smashing his kit up, and I guess just the whole thing, the energy, the excitement of it all. That was my moment. It was once I seen that, I was like, right, that's it.
Yeah,
I'm going to be a drummer.
That's cool. And
that's going to be my instrument.
Did your dad support that once you decided to take up a real man's instrument? Just kidding, folks. Man, people are going to slam me for that.
Well, initially, my parents, and especially my dad, was reluctant. For obvious reasons, he'd already tried me with a musical instrument, and been supportive, and it hadn't worked out. Also, we lived in a small cottage, and so the thought of me wanting to play the drums in a small cottage, and the fact that I'd already tried and failed at another instrument, that they were highly reluctant. So sorry, excuse me a second. Anyway, I badgered on and on and on, and I was obsessed, as you are when you're like that age. I didn't have the equipment, but I'd be tapping on my school table with pens and pulling out my books so I could play little drum rolls with pens across books. Drawing, in my art class and stuff like that, I'd be drawing drum kits. And anyway, my parents did finally, kind of, I suppose, decide that, okay, let's give it a try. But I remember a friend of my father's, a gentleman called Matty, who he'd been playing with for many years. He was an older guy, was packing in. So my dad said, look, Matty's getting rid of his kit, but I want to take you to have a go at the kit, and I want to see that you've got some semblance of some kind of kinship with this instrument. I'm not just going to get a kit unconditionally,
That's
and
cool.
So, it was.
Don't tell us that you smashed it up at the end.
Yeah, before I finished my little piece, I smashed it up before I started, then showed I could build it back together. No. So we went, and of course, even slightly surprising to me, when I got on the kit, I could play a basic beat. It wasn't that I just could play it, but I realized I'd been practicing that, sort of sitting down with my pens. I was always listening to my music, all my free time. So I was probably tapping along to that. So when I got on the kit, I just remember them both looking at each other and a bit like, oh yeah, he's, there's something there, I remember, Matty said to me that, oh, he's got something, Ken, he's got something.
That's
so
cool.
I think that was enough for my dad. And so I got that kit and yeah, that was the beginnings. And that was in the summer of 1980.
Wow, what a great story. Well, let's show a clip of what your playing is like now. And folks, tell us where you're watching from. Let me know if you have questions for Spike. I'll check the comments. I love this video. This is Sham 69 with Spike crushing it with Hurry Up, Harry. I love the chokes and the double vertical swipe on the China. That's so cool. Love that song. So I got to ask, and I'm sure other people watching are wondering after that great story. So how did it come to be that you ended up playing with the Damned? The band that was your sort of your Beatles moment, right? Like a lot of guys a little older than us, it was their Beatles moment. Seeing them on TV. For me, it was seeing Led Zeppelin in person. That was my moment. Yours was watching your dad watch the Damned, and then you end up playing with them. What's the story?
Yeah, and that, interestingly, was just a few months shy of 20 years on,
Wow.
Well, it came about that, by then I'd been playing in bands and recording and touring and all the usual kind of, stuff. I'd been, like a player for a while, but I hadn't played in a band of that level. And I was in a band that ended up, a band called Jolt that were based in London, and we ended up supporting the Damned, a venue called the Kentish Town Forum in London. And of course I was super stoked, but Rat Scabies wasn't playing for the Damned by then. And there's a bit of a story leading to all that. They had another drummer called Gary that was drumming for them. So and I knew that because I'd been to see them when they got back together, hoping to see Rat with him, and he wasn't. But anyway, so we got the support slot, which was very exciting, particularly for me. And anyway, we played our slot as the support slot, and then we watched the Damned, and it was great. And of course, because we was on the same bill, we had access to to the backstage area and that afterwards. So I went upstairs, and the first person I met in the band was Captain Sensible, and the guitar player. Yeah. And I remember I said to him, because I was pretty excited. I was like, oh, man, it's so great to play on this bill. I started playing drums because of Rat Scabies. And at that time, they'd had a fallout, and he groaned. He went, oh. And I thought, oh, God, what I've said. I'm trying to make a good impression, and I was, I was enthused and I was excited. And I'd had a drink, it was, by then I was enjoying the evening. But the shocking part, he turned round to me and said, what are you doing? Because this was about Christmas time. And he says, what are you doing next year? And I says, oh, well, what do you mean? And he goes, and he said something about, we may need your services. And I was like, what?
Wow.
What you're thinking that you sort of want me to do a bit of playing? And I remember afterwards going, to my friend afterwards, and I kind of said, yeah, okay, but yeah, of course. Not really knowing what to say. And he gave me his number. And I remember sort of going to my friend, afterwards, who'd been with me and actually helping me set up my kit and everything. I said, I'm sure I've just been asked if I, to play for the Damned, but it all seems so surreal.
Right.
And he was like, nothing's going to happen for a little while, but leave it till the new year. Because it was very close to Christmas, as I remember. It was probably something like, December the 20th, the show was on. And, and anyway, when the next day when I was home, I couldn't resist. I thought, I've got to phone this number,
Yeah.
So even though he said, leave it till the new year. And, Anyway, I phoned it because it went straight to answer machine. But somehow, maybe I persisted and I eventually got through. And I said, am I right in thinking, that you'd be looking for a new drummer? And he says, yeah, definitely. So I don't know what
probably saw you play that same.
Well, what
show,
it was,
right?
sorry, there's a bit of a backstory to that. That's my story. But apparently the agent, who was the agent for the band I was in, Joel, and the agent for the Damned, must have heard whispers about it. And, and he was a musician as well. He was an agent, but like a lot of musicians, there's always something secondary you got to do,
Yeah.
And he was an agent. And I could tell you a good story relating to him and Morrissey, because he helped me with the Morrissey gig as well.
Oh, nice.
Dear old Mike Hink. He passed recently, but he did a lot of good things for me. And anyway, he'd obviously got wind of that. The Damned, something was, occurring in the drumming department, and he must have said, "Look, check out the support band. Have a look at the drummer. He could be a man, without you having to start, just looking too far." And the funny thing was, after we played this gig, Dan, my friend, the guy that was helping me with my kit, he said to me, he goes, "God, I seen Dave Vanian and Captain Sensible watching the band's set." And he goes, I've been to loads of gigs. I never see him watching the support band.
Oh, wow. How funny.
And we didn't click anything at that time. But then afterwards, it's, they'd obviously, I found out that they'd obviously come to have a look, the drummer from the support band. So that's how that all came about.
That's interesting. So when you got that gig, did you go to your dad? Was he around? And did you go to your dad to say, hey, you remember seeing the Damned and that was my moment and now I'm playing with them? Like, did you have that conversation?
Well, I told my mom and dad, and they're both still about. And actually, this poster here is, if you can see it, that was my first gig, and that was in Valencia in Spain.
Oh, I see it's in Spanish. Yeah. That's so cool.
So I did. Right? I mean, my dad didn't remember he remembered the program, the Old Grey Whistle Test, but he probably watched so many. Yeah. That moment didn't have the same impact for him as it did for me. But yeah, of course, and they remembered how much of a fan I was of the Damned, and I mean, they kind of recognized it with a lot of bands. Sham 69. I play, for GBH. That's not down here, but I stepped in for GBH last year, and in the early 80s, I was obsessed with GBH. And when I told my mother I was doing some playing for them, she was very excited.
Oh, neat. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. So in the long run, you had their support.
Yeah. I mean, yes, of course, they got me the kit. I was allowed to practice. The rule in our house was that, I could only practice when there was nobody in the house, which was kind of, they were both working, but they worked shifts. I could never make a plan with it. I couldn't, think, right, I'm going to get home from school tonight and practice because they might both be in, or one of them might be in. Or I might come home and think, I'm supposed to be meeting my mates, and then they'd be like, "Oh, the house is empty," right? You know what I mean?
Right,
Jump
right.
on the kit.
Well, I want to show another video because
Okay.
there's some diverse stuff here. We're gonna go to you playing with HR of Bad Brains,
Okay.
reggae, punk. Check this out. This is really cool. So cool. What a cool groove. That looks like so much fun to play.
Yeah, I mean, I love playing the reggae stuff. And to play with HR was such an honor. That was as mad as me getting, playing for the Damned. And in some ways more so because I love the Bad Brains, but they were an American band, Dan, and it just seemed like, I never thought I'd get to play for the Damned, but it seemed more graspable than playing for a member of Bad Brains,
Yeah, who you're already a huge fan of as well.
I was already a huge fan. And in fact, not that many years ago, I did a little interview for I don't know if it was a drum magazine or it might have been something to do with a drum company that I'm endorsed with, and they have artist spotlights. And one of the questions was, who would you love to play for? Who's still, who's still alive. Or it might have even been alive or dead. No, it can't have been. It must have been who's still, who feasibly you might be able to play for. Right. And I said Bad Brains,
Interesting.
That was one. I said Bad Brains and another band I love called No Means No. But, and then a few years later, I'm playing for HR. And that song's a Bad Brains song. So it's like that one.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and interestingly, I've just found out that I should be playing for him again this summer when he comes over to the UK.
Oh, nice! That's great.
So I'm excited for that, so that means now I get my reggae head back on again.
Yeah, literally.
I sometimes leave those kind of playing because I do, different styles, and that's what I love, but. Sometimes because maybe, I'm not doing anything with that, it kind of, it gets put away,
Yeah.
Something like, finding out, I'm going to be, playing these shows in the summer. Suddenly like, right, okay, better start practicing my one drop.
Right, exactly. You mentioned earlier that you had a story as well for how the Morrissey relationship came around. You want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah, okay. So, so the same agent... Mike King, he must have sort of, I'd met the guitarist when I was in this band, Jolt. We were playing also, doing what you do when you're in that thing, which is, basically playing everywhere, especially in the key cities for us, London. And I was playing this show in London. We were playing a lot. It was a London-based band, and we were playing, and I met the guitarist from Morrissey called Alan White, and he came up to me afterwards, and he was like, really enjoyed your drumming, and I enjoyed the band, but I enjoyed the drumming, and I thought, that's cool. And we started bonding over. He said, one of the songs reminds me of, the drumming on the Cult album, Love. I don't know if you know that, but You know, it's a drummer called Mark Brzezicki, who was, you know, a great drummer from Big Country. And he just stood in for the band to play that album. But anyway, as soon as he said that, I thought, I know the song because I have taken kind of this drum pattern from this Cult song. So, you know, we were laughing. I was like, oh, God, yeah, yeah. I said, you know, it's funny. Anyway, Morrissey was... had this at that point. Mike Hink was Morrissey's agent as well, and in fact, he used to be the Smiths' agent. So they went back a long way. And yeah, there's two funny stories actually. The one funny story is when after that whole business with me playing supporting the Damned, we were playing my own band. Jolt were playing, and Captain Sensible wanted to come and see us. I suppose he wanted to have a second, a secondary look, just to. Just to check and see, if kind of, whatever their immediate, gut reaction was to me as a player, if he still felt watching me a second time. So he came, and then unbeknownst to me, Alan White, the guitarist from Morrissey, was at that same show having a look as well.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah, and they were both talking with each other and not realizing...
Yeah, that's hilarious.
They were both kind of, like sort of drummer watching. But that's the one story. But the other one with Mike Hink, which was funny, was when I got got the Morrissey gig and was told that it was mine if I wanted it. I remember saying, "Oh God, that's great. Finally, I'm in a level," because we were playing Coachella. My first show with Morrissey was playing.
Oh.
Coachella Festival, and that was kind of how it came about that I even went for an audition. I mean, none of us had ever heard of Coachella. It was new, it was just like, oh, he's playing this festival in California called Coachella. You need to, and I thought, oh, well, I'd love to do that, but but I thought it was just a gig. I thought he just needed a drummer as a kind of stand-in. But it turned out after I'd gone for the audition, it was like, no, it was the position as the drummer. So anyway, when Mike King, said, look, it's looking like you've got the gig. And I was like, oh, God, that's great. Finally, I can, pack in, doing all these other, side hustle. Well, like being like drum lessons and stuff. Things I still do, actually. But it was because of these words that Mike King said to me. I said, oh, that's great, Mike. Finally, I can, stop doing, I can give up my, my drum teaching and just be a player. And he goes, no, don't do that. Don't ever do that. Always keep these things going.
Smart.
And I says, yeah. And I says, well, I don't need to know. I'm playing for Morrissey. And I said, look at you. You're Morrissey's agent. And he goes, yeah, but I'm a bass player.
That's funny.
Yeah. And you know what? As soon as he said that, I thought, right, he, that changed my attitude straight away. And although I went away, for months, on end on tour with Morrissey, I didn't stop. I got somebody in to work for me, and I realized, keep these things going,
That's cool.
And I've always done that since. So I've always, gone away. And when I've been away, I have somebody in that's kind of, that runs, my little drum school here, keeps that going. And then when I'm about, I do it myself. But if I have to go away, I've got like an assistant that can just keep it all going. Which is good for me, but it's also good for the students because it keeps the continuity up. I don't really want to be like, right, I'm off for 2.5 months or even 3 weeks. It just keeps it all kind of going. So, but that was my little funny story with it.
That is
the way
funny.
That you said when we meet so confidently, you're Morrissey's agent. It's like, yeah, but I'm a bass player. He was making it abundantly clear that
You partly, well, not partly, you answered another question I was going to ask with that story, but I'm still going to ask it in a slightly different context. So my question I was going to ask is, you've played with all these great bands, and the question was, what's the number one thing you can think of that you learned from playing with all those bands? And that you did mention is something you learned, but you learned from an agent. what did you learn working with all the bands that you've worked with that either helped you in the studio or on the road or on the business side of being a musician or a player or fashion? What did you learn from actually one of the bands?
Well, I mean, I've learned a lot of, I mean, with a lot of the acts and artists I work with, there's a lot of prickly characters, in them. I mean, they're the great artists they are for a reason, and so you have to, you sometimes, it's not about treading lightly, but you have to kind of, it's difficult to put into words. I mean, everybody said, you have to be easy to get on with and things like that. And of course you do.
Right.
But, maybe it's a little bit of stroking egos. But often, when you're around the people, it doesn't seem egotistical how they're acting. It's not like it's about, let them have their, throw their tantrums because, they've got the wrong color towels or something like that. It's not really about that.
Right.
It can be about, it can be about all sorts of little things. Just, where you are in the pecking order sometimes. That's a big one, because you might not want to feel your X number in the entourage, but you are, and it's often better if you don't try and act like you're not.
Right.
You're something else. But that's not to mean that you should act that you should put up with everything, either. You've got to stand your ground, but it's just about sort of being observant. If I was trying to sort of just put it into a simple word, I'd say, be very observant with what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And on stage, especially as well, so that you read the situation and you can see, God, so-and-so struggling there, right, let's be mindful of that. Or
A bass player agent type of
yeah. Singer hasn't got the right water,
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Great advice.
I mean, there's so many of them, really. I mean, it's that's just like like one or an obvious one, but to me, it's about learning. Because each one of these acts that I've gone into, Dan, they're an established thing, very established. And I don't mean just as in where they are, as in, where they are, their position in the music world. Is they're established when you walk into the room.
Yeah.
It's like, right, okay, how's this working? Okay. So, that person's particularly quiet, but, they're a very powerful force within the musical unit. They're quiet. So you have to kind of, you don't know that when you're looking at a picture or watching the videos or listening to the songs to learn them. Oh, by the way, by the same time, somebody else may be, very much larger than life, maybe more than you like, but it kind of, you have to sort of be right. Yeah, but, they're critical and they've been in this role for 10 plus years already, 20 years.
Right.
It's the same way with like when I play with Sham 69, I am playing with the three original guys.
Yeah.
So it's not like a version of.
And they go way back.
They're nearly 50 years now.
Yeah.
It's only a couple of years short of 50 years. So when you go in that room to play, especially the first time or the first handful of times, you can imagine what the dynamic's like. It's not like walking into a room where it's like, okay, there's the artist. Oh, have you played for them before? No, I haven't. Oh, but they played, on the last tour. Oh, but that brass section's new, or there's two of them. It's kind of like that, right? It's me, and I've got the three guys facing me.
Yeah.
As they're playing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
You can sometimes feel, it's it can be a bit overwhelming if you let it,
Right. Like you said, you gotta know your place, know your surroundings, and have a high level of respect for everybody.
Yeah, and you know, and then that kind of transcends to how to the band's audience, you know, because
Yeah.
you know you play these kind of shows, and you know what I've done, and of course the audiences are very different. You know, it's like you know when I was playing with Morrissey, you know, you'd have people weeping, you know, when a certain song may be played, and you know it's a very powerful emotional, you know, that has a very powerful and emotional impact on you, you know, which you play in the song when you experience that.
Yeah.
At the same time, as some of the mad punk gigs I played, I got to be, you know, mindful not to get hit in the hand, hit in the head with a beer can, you
Right.
know.
Right. And that's just from the singer
Yeah.
or the bass player agent.
Yeah, I was going to say, or the guitarist. Yeah,
Let's watch a clip of you playing with Memoriam. This is As Bridges Burn. Have respect. Don't burn your bridges, folks. Check this out. I love that. I got to tell you something funny though. So I'm going to play just the beginning of it again, and then the side shot of you. If you look behind you, there's the giant column of speakers, and watch the lights on the speakers. And I'll tell you what I thought for a moment. Hold on, check this out. So you saw the lights kind of like do this. At first, I thought I thought they were like Lawrence Welk bubbles, and I'm like,
yeah.
that doesn't fit the music. And then I realized it was the lights doing something.
Yeah,
Maybe I need
yeah,
new glasses.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's funny watching, you know, like you when you putting these clips on, you know, just looking at the dramatic, you know, swing from the kind of old school, you know, original sort of, you know, 77 punk to the sort of roots of reggae to the death metal, you know,
Right.
and just the shift, you know, because obviously the death metal, oh, it's all about the feet. You
Right.
know,
And that's why it's so important to have more tools in your toolbox to get more opportunities, you know, and you've
yeah.
played that. You've been in the punk rock for so long that I've really been looking forward to ask you this question. I intentionally didn't ask you on one of our personal chats. I saved this question for the show. What do you think? This is just my perception, and I don't know if I'm correct or if there is a correct answer or if it's too subjective, but do you think did the Who invent punk? Like if you look at the some of the really early music by the Who, was some of that punk? I mean, even by description, there's so much rebellion in it, and oh, you got Keith Moon and the drum kit thing, but you know, like what? That's kind of been my thoughts. But I honestly am not schooled enough on the genre to know that much of the history. What are your thoughts? Were they part of that movement? Did they spark the movement, or were they wannabes?
Well, they were definitely way beyond wannabes. I mean, it's an interesting sort of, it's a topic of conversation in itself, this, because, people are always trying to define, where did punk start,
Right.
The obvious argument is, was it the Ramones? Was it the Sex Pistols? Was
Right.
it in America? Was it the UK? That is the most common.
And of those, even if we narrowed it down to those two, and if everyone agreed on that, well, who were their biggest influences?
That's right. So we can go back to sort of, what we might call proto-punk. And this is an interesting thing for me because, of course, I have played with, I'm just a tad younger than the original punkers, the Damned and Sham.
Right.
They
me.
I've got 10 years on me or something. Not much now in the grand scheme of things, but a big difference when you're 12 and they're 22,
Yeah.
Not so different when they're, 55 and you're 45.
Right.
But of course, I got to play for New York Dolls. Now, I consider them, and many were the proto-punks,
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we could say Iggy, the Stooges,
Yeah.
MC5. I would definitely say, that. And of course, you're perfectly right to say The Who. And the Sex Pistols, or particularly, Steve Jones and Paul Cook. Well, the band, really. They all loved The Who and the Small Faces, and basically the angrier British bands,
Right.
And so I looking at it, of course, you could say, they're the proto punks because they there's no doubt about it that the likes of MC5 and Iggy and the Stooges and all of that, they must have obviously had some kind of influence from The Who and the energy and the sound and the attitude and the lyrics as well initially, My Generation and all
I was just going to say that whole youth movement attitude and all of that,
Yeah. So, I mean, I would, it's a very, the answer is so subjective. But I would say, of course, we looking back, we could say, of course, the punk it now becomes what defines the work of the genre punk. For some it's clothes, image, fashion. Right. For others it's music. For a lot it's fashion and music. For others it's more political.
Right.
And for others it's a sound. So everybody's got the kind of their own idea of what it is. So so to me, of course, I've got my own thoughts of where the beginnings of punk rock is, was and where it started. But we can go beyond The Who, Little Richard, I mean,
right.
I mean, out of all the rock and rollers, and I loved all of them. The energy that comes from, the performances when you were, and little Jerry Lee Lewis as well, I mean, setting his piano on fire.
Right, yeah.
So you can go, far back. I even hear it in people like Buddy Rich, I mean, I know a lot of punk drummers that, that love Buddy Rich just because of his energy. They just feel it's a punk energy,
that makes sense.
Play punk, but he probably didn't like. And I'll tell you a weird thing. That is a little weird thing. Once I was traveling somewhere on the plane, and I'd set myself some music. When you get on a plane, you haven't got the internet, so you tend to plan. And I was going to listen to this podcast on something to do with Buddy Rich, and I probably had something else lined up as well, a punky thing. And I put it on, and I didn't put it on from the beginning. It just kind of caught in the middle of a tune, and I could just hear this wash of cymbals, And I thought, oh fucking hell! I'm sorry, excuse my swearing.
That's okay.
I thought, flipping heck. I thought, I'm obviously listening. I've put the wrong one on. I want to listen to, the Buddy Rich podcast. I'm obviously listening to, something else. And then the music went on a bit, and it was Buddy Rich. But it just caught it in the middle of this song where the cymbal was so washy.
Yeah.
It could have been Keith Moon or Rat Scabies.
Wow. Yeah, that's neat.
Isn't that
That makes
strange?
perfect sense too.
You know, and I mean, you know, I like you, I know when I hear the sounds, but that
Yeah,
got me.
yeah,
And so, you know, when people do say, you know, like, yeah, buddy, you know, like he's got that energy, I think, yeah, he definitely has, you know, or he
yeah,
had, should I say, he
yeah.
definitely had. He played with such guts, so, and you know, such like a, you know,
Aggressive.
such intensity, you know.
Yeah, intensity. Yeah, yeah.
Even when
Cool.
he's playing the most beautiful mellow stuff, it's intense. Just the
Yeah,
same as when, you know, I used to watch Bad Brains and a lot of reggae artists, and people sort of think, you know, it's like, oh yeah, reggae, you know, lying on some sun-kissed beach drinking a cocktail. It's like, well, I
right.
don't know what reggae you listen to, but the reggae I hear, some of it's heavy and dark, you know, and really, and really a lot of weight
Lit-
to it. You
Yeah,
know, you know, it's it doesn't get me wanting to, you know, I get where the sitting on the beach kind of, you
yeah.
know, Caribbean vibe comes from, but it's not all that. And when
Right.
I've watched a lot of reggae players play, especially the drummers, it's intense. It's not laid,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
but it's a different kind of intensity.
Yeah.
But
Thanks for
nonetheless, it's
entertaining that
intense.
question. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
neat topic, you know.
Mm.
Cool. So for my last question, I love this question because this is when people really get to know you, Spike.
Mm.
This is the Spike T. Smith fun fact segment. So
Okay.
when you're not teaching, when you're not touring, when you're not recording, when you're not performing, when you're completely away from music, what do you like to do that's completely unrelated to your profession?
Well, I like reading. I do a lot of reading. I like running.
Cool.
I like walking. I
What kind
like
of stuff do you like?
traveling.
What do you like to read?
Well, I tend to read like a lot of autobiographical stuff, really,
Cool.
or you know, like some stuff that's relative to what I do. I like reading a lot of things, you know, that you know could be related to sort of music and drums, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I never moved that far away from it, I suppose. I
That's
like
cool though.
socializing. You know, I'm a
Yeah.
socialite. I like doing that. I'm not sort of somebody that watches TV and films and things like that a lot. That's
Yeah.
not, you know, I do a bit of that, but it's not a lot. But yeah, I like cycling, you know, all those kind
Cool.
of things. Really, you know, if I go somewhere, um, you know, and I take my bicycle with me so that I can cycle around wherever it is I am. You know,
Oh, that's cool.
things like that. I go for a run. So that's always a funny one with Sham because you know when we, you know, when we play in you know in different countries, you know, and we're all you know like very much there as the unit. You know, they kind of laugh at the fact that I'm up and about going for a run.
Funny.
No, knowing that the night before I've been going out and having a drink, I think that's the part that you know.
That's funny. Thanks for sharing. So you teach, do you teach online also?
I do, yeah.
Let
I
everyone
get,
know
you
how
know, I
they
get.
can, yeah, tell people how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in
Yeah, well, I'm
listening.
very easily contactable. I mean, all the usual social media, everything with me is related to, you know, to my given, you know, name, Spike T. Smith. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, spiketsmith.com
Cool.
is one of my websites. And I've also got spiketsmithdrums.com, which is
Cool.
more my teaching website. That's more informative about, you know, about lessons and
Great.
you know information with regards to my teaching. The spiketsmith.com is more my general services because I can offer online recording services, you know, all the things that you know a modern musician you know does or needs to do, you
Yeah.
know. So I can teach in person if they're in the UK or and they want to travel, or if they're you know relatively local to London, I'm not too far away.
Cool.
If it's somebody that's you know in the US, and I've taught a number of people in the US, it's online.
Great.
So yeah, it's a great thing that actually because the people that you do online, it tends to work that they, and I would do the same now. It's like, yeah, I really want that person to help me. I don't want a person to help me. I want that person because they seem to offer something that, I feel will be a benefit to me. I mean, that as the person that's thinking about it,
Right.
So, and I'm very passionate about the kind of playing I do, like the, if we move away from calling it even punk, let's call it high energy drumming, because the death metal style drumming to punk drumming, it's very different.
Yeah.
But they both are very high energy.
High energy.
They're both very physical styles of playing. And I'm very passionate about that. And I feel a lot of the time that, like the punk, alternative, high energy, let's call it, drumming, is often underrepresented educationally in the mainstream. That is, in a lot of shows and things like that. When you go to kind of a lot of the sort of drum style events or shows, they've got a lot, all what you'd expect to see. The jazz, the fusion, the Latin jazz fusion players.
Right.
They have a certain amount of metal players as well, but the punky stuff seems to get overlooked. And I'm like, why? It's it's a very valid and articulate form of playing and expressionism.
Right, exactly. And that's just it. Expressionism. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
So,
thanks for taking time in the evening to join me. Really appreciate it. Stay on the line with me for a couple of minutes after I say goodbye to the audience. And audience, thank you so much for following what we do. Check out other interviews on our whatever channel you're watching this on: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Vimeo. And you can also check out our membership site, www.drumtalktvbrilliance.com. A lot of fun going on there. And we'll be back with more fun. We've got Steve Moore, the Mad Drummer, coming up. Is that this Saturday? It is the 22nd. If you're watching us live or you happen to see this before then. And lots of other fun interviews coming up. Thanks, everybody, so much.